Welcome to Peninsula Seniors Lecture Series. Sit back, get comfortable, and let's go see what Marty has for us today.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome once more to another Wednesday morning lecture program from the Peninsula Seniors. We really have an interesting program about American history for you this morning. We're going to be talking about Buffalo Bill Cody, and our speaker is someone who's spoken to us before, one of the librarians from the Malaga Cove Library, Miss Kendall Cody Cornwell. And as I've instructed you in the written material, be sure and leave your spurs at the door. Otherwise, we're going to call the sheriff and have you locked up. So, without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Kendall Cody Cornwell.
Howdy. Thank you for coming. I appreciate this. This is on William Frederick Buffalo Bill Cody, and we'll get into the Wild Bill part later. Edward Anvil, husband to Karl Marx's daughter, Eleanor, wrote of William Cody, very tall, very straight, very strong, the immense frame so perfectly balanced, so clearly built, knit together so firmly asymmetrical, that until you stand by it and feel it towering over you, as it were absorbing your own lesser individuality, you hardly recognize what a giant was here. But no matter the physical description, wrote Anvil, nothing of this, and indeed nothing can, give an idea of this immense personality of this extraordinary man. And that's the extraordinary man right there when he was about 17 or 18 years old. William Frederick Cody, Buffalo Bill, died in 1917. Former President Theodore Roosevelt was made the honorary vice president, and the Buffalo Bill Memorial Association called Cody the most renowned of men, iron nerve whose daring opened the West to settlement and civilization, an American of Americans. He embodied those traits of courage, strength, and self-reliant hardihood which are vital to the well-being of the nation. Cody was born February 26, 1846. His parents were Isaac and Mary Cody, and he was one of 8 children. He was one of 3 boys. Both brothers died by the time they were 12. His oldest brother, Samuel, died when he was taking some cows. He was on a high-spirited mare. He was taking some cows back home, and the horse reared up and fell over on top of him. And back then, well, maybe now, I don't know, they couldn't do anything about it. And they took him home, and he was 12, and unfortunately, he passed away the next day. This helped make the family move to Leavenworth, Kansas, or, as it was called, Bloody, Kansas. This was in the 1850s, just before the Civil War. It was up to each state to decide if the state was going to be a slave state, and Cody's father was stabbed for speaking out against slavery. And there's all sorts of conflicting ideas about this. He said that he was there. His sister said he wasn't there. So it's hard to say. But anyway, Isaac was stabbed. It hit his lung. And he did semi-recover from that and resumed his normal life. But a few years later, it killed him. And by the time Isaac died, Buffalo Bill was only about 10 or 11 years old. So at the death of his father, he became the breadwinner of the family. He had, sisters, he had his mother, and he had he had Charlie, who was a small brother. And he went to work for Russell's, Majors, and Waddell, taking freight across the plains. So Cody virtually started working when he was 9 years old and worked the rest of his life. And now that brings me to the Pony Express. And there's a lot of conflict about the Pony Express these days. There's lots of books on Buffalo Bill, lots of new books on Buffalo Bill. There's lots of question if Cody did or did not ride in the Pony Express. There are a few books out there that says he did not. Lewis S. Warner has most recent published book on Buffalo Bill. In his book, Buffalo Bill's America, Warner claims that Bill Cody was in school. Warner claims that Cody was a determined ball player. Warner feels that unless Cody's sister or his dying novelist or a friend, good friend, sang his praise as a Pony Express rider, Warner felt that reading between the lines, Cody did not ride for the Pony Express. On the other hand, Dan Russell, in the Lives and Legends of Buffalo Bill, said that Cody rode over 300 miles in 72 hours as a Pony Express rider. And if any of you had been horseback riding recently, you know how tiring that would be. Steve Frazier, author of this book, I went to a symposium on Buffalo Bill at the Buffalo Bill Historical Center. It was a bunch of historians, and this fellow was there, Steve Frazier, and he's the curator of Buffalo Bill's museum at his grave on Lookout Mountain outside of Denver, Colorado. And he writes, those who questions Cody's involvement with the Pony Express have suggested he invented his association with it to add to his reputation. Perhaps. But one could ask, did William Cody become famous because of the Pony Express? Or did the Pony Express become famous because of William Cody? The Pony Express was short-lived. It only lasted about a year and a half. Were it not for the recreation of the Pony Express in Buffalo Bill's Wild West for nearly 30 years, it might have ended up a minor footnote in American history. So he had a lot to do with the Pony Express. In 1863, his mother died, and soon after that, Cody enlisted in the Civil War. And that's him in his private outfit. That's what he looked like when he was 17 or 18 years old. He makes it very clear that he had no intention of doing anything of the kind. I think he was being truthful when he wrote that he found himself in the Union Army after he woke up from an awful drunk. And I think it's true. He wouldn't have said it if it wasn't true. And he was a private the whole time he was in the armed forces. He never made his way up or anything. I have his, you can get from the National Archives, I've got all of his records of, they call row and they write it down. It's all written down. So after the main war, he was stationed in St. Louis working for an army hospital. And he met his wife-to-be, Louisa Maud Frederici. Louisa was a young woman who grew up in the French-speaking quarters in St. Louis. Her family was middle class, and she had been educated in a convent. As Warner put it to Cody, she was a dazzling, beautiful woman. We can only guess at his attraction to her. For her, he was very handsome. They swept each other off their feet, and after seeing each other only a few times, they were married in March of 1866. He was 19, she was about 23. Why did they ever marry? They were about as different as two people can be. Later, when Cody tried to get out of the marriage at the turn of the 20th century, he said that Louisa trapped him into marrying her. Boy-like, I thought it was very smart to be engaged, he said. In Joy Cassing's book, Buffalo Bill's Wild West, it brings out for the first time the speculation that Cody's sexual magnitude might have hurried him into an early marriage. He didn't look like that when he hitched onto her. He had short hair and he didn't have a mustache or a goatee. It is interesting to wonder why Louisa's parents let her marry a young man who was 4 years younger than herself with very unsettling prospects. In the 1860s, if you weren't married by the time you were about 25 years old, you were on the road of being an old maid. That may have been what her parents feared. Also, Louisa was a strong-willed and temperamental young woman. Any words of discouragement from her parents may have made her more adamant that she had to marry Bill Cody. She was pregnant from almost the first day of their marriage. He stayed with her for the first 9 months they were together, the longest period he was ever with her during their 30 or 40 years marriage. Cody tried to be domestic. He took Louisa back to Kansas to his mother's home in Leavenworth, which had been turned into a hotel, and he tried hotel keeping. He was poor at that because he kept on letting everyone stay for free. Louisa had made it clear to him that she did not want some wandering buffalo hunting husband. He was poor at hotel keeping and longed for the freedom of a job in the plains. When Louisa was ready to give birth to their first child, he left her with his sister to find employment on the plains. No doubt they spoke angry words when they parted. He would not return to her for almost a year, in a period of no cell phones, no telephones. For the rest of the year of 1866, the year he married her, the year that, you're supposed to be lovey-dovey still, he lived in a dugout on the plains with another man for the winter of 66, 67, and it really makes you wonder about him. It really does. This would be their married life together from then on. He would enter into life with her for a short time, followed by long periods of separation. The longest time apart would be 7 years, which they did not write, talk, or see each other. Cody would comment when he tried to divorce Louisa at the turn of the 20th century, "She made little of my efforts to succeed in life," Cody remembered. "She said that I was a failure." Louisa could be abusive to him and unkind. When everything was going all right, we seemed to get along pretty well. But when things were difficult and I wasn't getting along very well, things were the other way and we could not get along so well. He hated domesticity. She hated show business. Neither would give to the other. Unlike Elizabeth Custer, who rode side saddle with Custer's cavalry to be with her husband, Louisa would hardly ever travel with Cody's Wild West, not taking advantage of being with a man who would take her around the world. She would rage with jealousy when it became clear to her that he was with other women, and he was. But she never made an effort to be with Cody, or maybe he didn't want her with him, who knows. They shared little common ground. Later, on the rare time he was home, he would entertain guests that she never liked. She would eat in the kitchen while he ate with company in the dining room. As one business associate said, the poor old woman hardly knew the parade had gone by. Buffalo Bill's life was largely a haze to her. Still, they had 4 children, so there was something going on between them. Arda was a girl, Kit Carson Cody, Ora, and Irma. 3 of them died before Cody did, and all 4 of them was dead before Louisa, who died in 1921. And I'm always interested in this part of it because, you always wonder, well, if he had been with somebody else, maybe the story would have been different. But I don't know. He did take up with other gals. He on the side. He would have other girlfriends around him. It's too bad he couldn't have gotten in with somebody that he felt akin to. But anyway, so now I'm going to kind of skip on down because I could talk a long time at this. I'm going to skip to 1872, which was quite a year for Buffalo Bill. This was when he started his new career acting on the stage. And it was Ned Buttline who he met strictly by chance at a fort out west, and Buttline glommed onto him and asked a lot of questions about Wild Bill Hickok. And then Buttline went back east and he wrote one dime novel about Wild Bill Hickok, but used Cody's name. And that was so popular, it was just extremely popular, that somebody wrote a play. And Cody went back east, and Buttline met up with him, and Buttline took him to this play about himself. He actually saw an actor portray himself, Buffalo Bill, on stage. And Buttline looked at Cody and said, "I ought to write a play, and you ought to be my star." And Cody says, well, you might as well try to make an actor out of a government mule. So Cody went west, shaking his head, no way, no how. But Buttline kept writing him and saying, come on, there's money in it. And so that was the magic words. And in the fall of 1872, Cody met Buttline in Chicago, and he had a gentleman friend, Texas Jack Omohundro. Texas Jack is the guy standing up. And the other gentleman next to Texas Jack on the left is James Butler Hickok, and the other guy at the other end is Buffalo Bill. Hickok hadn't joined the group when I'm talking right now, but that was Texas Jack. Texas Jack brought a whole group. He brought cattle from Texas to Nebraska, and then he was in North Platte, Nebraska as a bartender. And of course, where does Cody go all the time? Was to the bar. And they met up with each other, and when Cody said he was going to go do this, Texas Jack said, oh yeah, I want to be an actor. Let's go be actors together. So Texas Jack went with him. Buttline wrote The Scouts of the Prairie in 4 hours. It was a bad play. Cody said if Buttline took 4 hours to write the play, he wanted to know what Buttline had been doing all that time. They rehearsed the play twice. On opening night, Cody got up in front of an audience and was so scared he could not remember one line of that play. He ad-libbed the whole thing, and the audience loved it. And I might add, as far as acting, it wasn't all that great. But it was different. Now, to our jaded view of it now, it would be nothing. I mean, you guys would sit there and go, oh my God. Because you've seen the Westerns and everything on TV and in the movies. But back then, it was pretty neat. They acted that play all up and down the eastern coast. At the end of the year, both Cody and Texas Jack noticed that Buttline was getting most of the earnings, and they were getting small amounts. So that when the end of that season, Cody told Buttline, that's it, we're finished. And as far as I know, they never met again. Buttline did write 2 other dime novels on Buffalo Bill. And to replace Cody, Buttline, Buffalo Bill got his good buddy, Wild Bill Hickok. And now we're going to have Kendall's history lesson. Wild Bill Hickok is the gentleman seated across the table from Buffalo Bill. And if you look at Hickok, you can say, boy, they sure look alike. And they do look alike. But Hickok was 10 years Buffalo Bill's senior. And remember, Cody lost his father. And Hickok, Hickok sort of took him under his wild wings, so to speak. And they actually hung out together when Cody was a young boy and a teenager. That's the way Hickok looked. He was a handsome fella. He was very charismatic. He was much of a showman himself. So Cody fashioned himself after James Hickok. But the 2 men were different guys. So when you come in and say, how is Wild Bill Cody? You've confused the 2 dudes, Wild Bill Hickok and Buffalo Bill. And they were a different temperament, definitely. You know, Hickok was a gunfighter. He killed about 8 guys. You know, he was the only guy that had the one-on-one gunfight in the middle of the street. You know, you've seen the gun smoke at the beginning when they're out there shooting it out. Well, that didn't happen very often, not hardly at all. But Hickok did it. He did it over a watch with Dave Tutt. And he shot Tutt in the gut. And I guess Tutt kind of lingered for a day or 2 and then died. But Hickok was the guy that did that. And of course, from that, we have gotten a lot of guys on TV shooting it out with each other. So exactly how Cody got Hickok on the stage is unclear. I can only think Hickok did it because they were so close. And I'll give Hickok credit. He didn't teach Buffalo Bill how to be a gunslinger or how to be a gambler. So, and Hickok was both those things. Even though Hickok was a showman himself, with his handsome appearance and his great way of dressing, Hickok claimed he hated acting and hated theater. He told Cody and Texas Jack what fools they were making of themselves. On one of his early appearances, the plot demanded that the two scouts swap yarns. During the conversation, a whiskey bottle was passed between them. As each took a drink from the bottle, he would tell a blood-curdling yarn. When Wild Bill's turn came, he took a mighty swig at the bottle, and for a long moment sat with a look of horror on his face. Then he swung his head sideways, spewed a mouthful of liquid towards the rings. Amidst thunderous applause, he roared, "Cold tea don't count! Either I get real whiskey or I ain't telling no story." So Cody got him real whiskey for that performance, but held him to cold tea from then on. Hickok had other problems. He liked to shoot too close to the dead Indians' legs, causing painful powder burns. Remember, this guy was a fabulous gunshot. He was just amazing. And shooting too close to their legs was painful. So to make the extras that were the Indians jump around on stage when they were supposed to be dead. And they got so fed up with it that finally they just got up and left. So here the dead Indians were wandering off the stage. It was pretty funky. Cody told Hickok to stop or get out, and Hickok left. They met later, they made up, but their relationship was never the same. So Hickok left show business, but Cody was on stage for the next 10 years of his life with his combinations and different plays. And interestingly enough, he had a series of actors that were in his show, and one of them was Edmund Booth, John Wilkes Booth's brother. And the reason why they figured this out is because Booth used the name Arlington when he was on the stage with Cody. And Booth died in June of 1890-something. And Arlington died that same year. And when they did a memorial on him in the newspaper, the two guys did the same thing. So we've deducted, and then at one program that I looked at, that Cody, it said E. Booth as one of the actors. So evidently Edwin Booth got up and must have improved the acting like tenfold to have Booth with him. But he was one of the actors in Cody's Wild West. I think that's pretty neat. So I'm going to skip again. I could talk forever, and I don't want to talk forever. So Cody remained on the stage, and in 1876, life just fell apart for the guy. There is his son, Kit Carson Cody. He's about 5 years old in that picture, and he contracted scarlet fever in April of 1876. He's Cody's only son, and he died in Buffalo Bill's arms of scarlet fever. It was pretty horrible, and today we're pretty lucky to have antibiotics, but back then there wasn't anything. This is at the Denver Public Library, and I'm going to have to spring for it and buy a big one. It's a picture of Buffalo Bill's little family in Rochester, New York, where he was living at the time. And this will give you a flavor of the times, literally. If you want to know what it was like to live in the Victorian times, look at this picture. Kit had just died when this picture had taken. Here's Louisa, and she's got on white lace around her neck. That's the sign of mourning. She's got black on and then white lace. That means you lost a child if you had white lace on. And here's the daughter, Arta, his oldest daughter, and Cody's got his arm around Arta. And here's some guy from the theater. He obviously looks like a theatrical type fellow. I bet Louisa hated him. And there's Ora, the little girl, and she has on white, but she has on a black waistband. And this is a sign of mourning. And back in the 1870s, you went into mourning when somebody died. And I have no idea who these people are. It looks like it's kind of chilly, so they're all decked out in their winter clothes. And it's a very interesting look of the 1870s. Mourning was still very, very much. And Louisa would wear black and that for a couple of years, usually. As a matter of fact, a lot of women never got out of black because, you know, people died very easily back then. There was no antibiotics. So I think this picture says a lot. So Cody was in horrible grief. And now we skip on down. He joined up with the 5th Cavalry, and he took part in the Sioux Wars of 1876. Now, the Sioux Wars, now the only war you know about in 1876 is Custer's Last Stand at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, or the Greasy Grass, as the Indians said. That's the only one I'm sure any of you are familiar with, unless there's somebody here who's a historian also. But there was other battles, and Cody took part in another battle in 1876. He had a battle with a sub-chief on the Cheyennes. Cheyenne and Sioux Indians were related as cousins. He had a duel with Yellow Hand. And according to most historians, they were on horseback and they rode towards each other and they both fired, and Cody's bullet went into Yellow Hand's leg and then killed the horse. And at the same time, Cody's horse stepped in a prairie dog hole, and both of them went down, and they both jumped up and they both aimed, and Cody's bullet went true and went in the guy's head and killed Yellow Hand. And Yellow Hand's went past Cody's. And the upshot was that Buffalo Bill ran forward and he grabbed the guy's long hair and he scalped him. Now, I'm sure you've all witnessed this on TV. But this was unusual for Cody. He didn't do things like this very much. And then as the 5th Cavalry, and he was scouting for the 5th Cavalry at the time, rode by, he hoisted that scalp and the war bonnet above his head and yelled, "First scalp for Custer." Very dramatic. And he had on one of the outfits that he would wear in his stage show. He had on velvet pants, Mexican pants, and he had on a fancy shirt, and he looked very theatrical. And what Cody did at this point was he lived his own myth. He sent the scalp, he sent the war bonnet, he sent the guy's bridle, he sent the rifle, he sent the guy's gun, he took the whole enchilada. He packed it up and shipped it off to his wife. She about fainted when she opened that package. And he gave it to somebody in Rochester, New York to display in a store window. And he stuck it out as a scout in that war, and he actually met up with what was left of the 7th Cavalry and rode Custer's horse Dandy for a while. So what Cody did was he took that whole thing, and then he went and he had a guy write a play, and he reenacted it. It was called Red Right Hand, or Buffalo Bill's First Scalp for Custer. And he dressed in that same outfit he killed Yellow Hand in. He got up on the stage and he reenacted it on the stage. And he would put that scalp and the war bonnet and the guns right there in the foyer for everybody to gawk at. And I have seen this scalp. the Buffalo Bill Historical Center had that on display for a number of years. And when I was there in the 70s, I saw it. It's nothing. It's just a little, all he did was he cut off the guy's ponytail and he got a little bit of his scalp in there. That's what he took. And it was all braided and dark-haired, and you could actually see it. And I think because of the politics of the day, they've taken it away. So you can no longer witness the scalp. I'm sure they still have it. And this was just incredibly popular. So it was in the late 1870s that Cody got the idea to take the show outside. In 1872, he was home in North Platte, Nebraska, and that was his hometown for 40 years. And if you ever pass through North Platte, Nebraska, you can go to his house there. And my father-in-law was born in North Platte, Nebraska, on land that used to be owned by William F. Cody. And on the deed, I've never seen the deed, because by the time I joined the family, the deed had been, it was at the bank or whatever. And on the deed, you can see Buffalo Bill's signature on there still. Anyway, Cody was in North Platte, Nebraska, his hometown, and he went downtown, no doubt, to wet his whistle, and he met up with the mayor. And he asked the mayor, he says, well, what do you got planned for the 4th of July? And Cody says, well, the mayor said, I don't have anything planned for the 4th of July. Cody didn't think that was right, so the mayor said, well, okay, you're in charge, get up a celebration. So in 1883, he started the Wild West he had the Wild West, first Wild West performance in North Platte, Nebraska. He advertised around, and all the cowboys came and tried out, and he had this big show. And it went over so big that he decided that he was going to do this outside, no more stage work. And so in 1883, he started the Wild West at an exposition ground near Omaha Fairgrounds. He started this show, and what Cody wanted was authenticity. Everything had to be just like it was out west. So what did he get to pull his stagecoach, which is this stagecoach right there? Untrained mules. Despite what you see on TV, mules pulled the stagecoaches out west. And what they would do is they'd get these wild mules. How they did this, I don't know. And they would somehow get these mules jerry-rigged, in front of that stage with a harness and everything. And then they'd pile everybody inside, and then some guy would get up there, and they would let those mules go, and those suckers ran like crazy. And that's how, speed was of the essence. And you'd sit in one of those things, and it rocks. I don't know if you've ever even been inside one, but it rocks back and forth just like this. And you bounce along, bound, bound, bound. And I tell you, seasickness was part of the trip. But anyway, and this is what he got. He got the untrained mules to pull. These mules are obviously trained. But he got untrained mules. And and in every show, he would have people ride in that stagecoach. There was nobody famous. Joe Smo, like us, would get to go. But if there was anybody famous, he would have them in there. So he had the mayor, his guy's name was Pap Clother, and members of the town council as passengers and honored guests. And Frank North, and he had Indians, real Indians. He had Frank North, who had a group of Pawnee Scout Indians. And he had Frank North, head of the Pawnees, who was going to make the attack. So what happens? They let the mules go, and of course, off they run. And then as they go around once, and then the Pawnee Indians on horseback in all their regalia come in and start shooting off blank cartridges and making, whooping noises, and those mules just went nuts. They took off into the sunset, and those things went around and around, and then Cody was supposed to come in with his cowboy rescuers and stop it. Well, what does one horse do when they run away? They all run away. And there was all just running pell-mell around this racetrack, around and around and around and around, until the mules tired and could finally be halted. It's a miracle the thing stayed up on its wheels. The mayor was restricted with difficulty from beating up Cody. Probably, I mean, I'd have been terrified. But Cody learned his lesson. He learned his lesson. You could not do that. Frank North took him aside and said, look, are you crazy? You can't have wild mules in this. You need to get, some old nag mules that'll just go around. So that's what he ended up with. And there's the mules. Not as lovely looking as the beautiful horses. Like I went to a shooting club, the Wyatt Earp Shooting Club. It was a gathering, and they had a stagecoach there, and they were pulled by Arabian horses. And those pups moved out, let me tell you. When they went really fast. But that's not what they looked like. This is what it looked like. And the stagecoach the one that's at the museum looks wonderful. That thing looks like it's about ready to fall apart. But anyway. So Cody was a showman for the next 30 years of his life. And he became one of the most well-known men in the 19th century. Okay, they would have a grand entry, just like a rodeo. These gals are riding side saddle and astride, but mainly side saddle. You can see it on the picture there. And behind them, there's the Indians, and they'd all come running in. And then they had bunking broncos, just like this. Now, the difference between now and then is they did not have the little corral that they're in a chute, and the guys would climb on. Oh no, there was some guy out there, and he's trying to get the horse to calm down enough, and here's the guy thinking about getting on him, and you can see, and the guy in the back there, you see the fellow on the white horse, that's Buffalo Bill, and this guy's going to get on that thing and ride it. And there was nothing, they would have to get it on the ground, and they went through all sorts of gyrations to get the guy on there. And I think they had injuries like almost a couple of times a month. These guys were really rough fellows. I mean, really tough. And this is Annie Oakley. And that's what she looked like. Forget Ethel Merman. Ethel Merman is out. And there she would make her own costumes. And there she is practicing. They are in England at Earl's Court. And look at the Indians standing there watching her. She's practicing her shooting performance. And there she is. And she did all sorts of amazing things. She would have somebody shoot one of those they use glass balls. And he would throw it up. She would run forward, jump over the table, run up, grab her gun, and shoot the thing before it hit the ground. She also had a dog. She never had any children, but she had dogs. And she'd have this dog sit on a stool. And she'd put an apple on the dog's head, and the dog just sat there real still. And she'd back up and shoot the apple off the dog's head. And then the dog would jump off the stool and grab the apple and run around and dance around just like he was having a high old time, not realizing that she could have killed him. There were 20 other women sharpshooters, but Annie Oakley was Cody's greatest co-star and biggest asset. She was with Cody for 17 years, and they never had a contact. And her husband was with the show too, and he was the guy that would come out with Annie Oakley and throw stuff and be the second man for her. And they were paid as one. Kind of weird. And he also had Sitting Bull. You've all heard of Sitting Bull, I hope. This is the guy they give credit for Custer's demise. He was a holy man, so Sitting Bull didn't even take part in Custer's last stand. And Annie Oakley was the reason that Sitting Bull joined the Wild West. Sitting Bull adored Annie Oakley, just adored her. And he first saw her in Minnesota, and Oakley was on the stage and came out, and she snuffed a candle out with a rifle shot, and Sitting Bull came to life. Annie recalled he was about as taken by my shooting stunts as anyone has ever been. He raved about me and would not be comforted. His messengers kept coming down to my hotel to inquire if I'd come see him. I had other things to do and could not spare the time. When Sitting Bull set $65 to Oakley's room, that got her attention. This amused me, she said, and she arranged to see him in the morning. She returned the money, accompanied by a signed photograph, and so she saw him, and he was so over the moon with her, he adopted her as his daughter into the Sioux tribe and christened her Little Sure Shot. And there's some truth to this, because at the museum where his grave is, there's artifacts that were from Sitting Bull that came from Annie Oakley. So evidently she got some stuff from him. He evidently gave her things. This is Cody. The Indian sitting down is Sitting Bull. The guy sitting there is the interpreter, and the kid at Sitting Bull's feet is Johnny Baker. Johnny Baker was Cody's adopted son. Well, he never really legally adopted him because the parents wouldn't let that happen. But this kid traveled with Buffalo Bill all his life. And Cody taught him to shoot. He became a sharpshooter. And this brings me to Elizabeth Bacon Custer. And there she is. That's what she looked like at the turn of the century. She was Custer's wife. And she went to see Buffalo Bill's Wild West in 1886, and she announced that she was much pleased with the exhibition. The following August, she got a letter from William Cody asking permission from Cody and asking her permission to reenact Custer's death. Cody promised to spare no expense to do credit to our exhibition and deepen the luster of your glorious husband's reputation as a soldier and man. Cody called his reenactment of Custer's rally as something educational. He felt he was doing an educational thing with that Wild West. He wrote that it would acquaint the audience with the valor and heroism of the man who had made civilization possible on this continent. Laying it on a little heavy there, Bill, but that's okay. To be honest, a lot of our ideas on Custer's last stand comes from Buffalo Bill's Wild West. And his respect for her was just never ending. Libby had never seen her husband's last battle, but she was invited to superintend the picture. She was invited to superintend the picture of the spot where her husband was killed. She came to many rehearsals. She befriended Annie Oakley and socialized with her. It has been rumored that Cody even gave her a horse to ride in the grand opening of the show. I have no hard fact on that, but it sounds like something he would offer, and she might take him up on it. And there she is as a widow. She's probably in her 40s there. In the first few weeks, Cody himself played General Custer. Warner, in his book on Buffalo Bill's America, said Cody's assumption of the Custer role for the opening week of Custer Rally meant the blonde, balding general suddenly appeared taller, broader, handsome, and far more handsome than the real Custer had ever been. The widow certainly appreciated the display. Libby Custer expressed her ambitions for the performance and her gratitude to Cody in a letter commending him for teaching the youth the history of our country, where the noble officers, soldiers, scouts sacrificed so much for the sake of our native land. And she thanked Buffalo Bill from my heart for all that you have done to keep my husband's memory green. You have done so much to make him an idol among children and young people. And also her brother-in-law, Niven Custer, the only Custer brother that didn't go to the Bighorn, who was still alive. He visited the Wild West when it went to Monroe, Michigan, and he actually met some of the Indians that were at Custer's last stand. And it was a pretty sobering experience. As a matter of fact, Cody, through an interpreter, told the Indians, well, this is Custer's brother, and they all went. Big step back. And it said that Mr. Custer looked at the Indians for a few minutes, and he said, such as these men have killed his brother. He told Cody with tears in his eyes. But I suppose that they were right. They thought they were right. Niven Custer's efforts to meet with the Sioux men who fought the war and to see the war from their point of view was in keeping with his sister-in-law's stand in 1886. To watch Custer's rally was in some ways to join Libby Custer in grief and to assert willingness to sacrifice for civilization. But just as important, it was also a gesture of reconciliation and forgiveness. Here she is. This is Lulu Parr. Is she wonderful? I wish I could dress like that all the time. I just love that get-up of hers. Lulu Parr was billed in the Wild West as the champion lady bucking horse rider of the world. She was born in 1876, and when her parents divorced, when she was a young girl, she went to live with her father out west. When she was 16, she returned to her mother in Ohio and lived with her. She married in 1896 and then divorced her husband in 1902. And why she did this, unknown. From there on, her Wild West adventures began. Lulu rode for a number of Wild West shows, but she was with Buffalo Bill, Pawnee Bill, around 1909 and stayed with them until it went out of business in 1913. With other Wild West shows, Lulu performed for King Edward VIII. She was so popular in Argentina, the president of Argentina gave her gifts. She performed in Buenos Aires and was publicized as highly as an opera singer would be. She wore flamboyant outfits, often she designed herself. She received numerous injuries during her career, but kept going. Once the horse she was riding fell on his side and she was pinned under him, knocked unconscious. Lulu's physician said her injuries would prevent her from riding for a few weeks. 30 minutes later, she was riding again with fans cheering her on. I don't know why I find that so wonderful. I've fallen off a horse, and it is not much fun. Lulu performed in the Wild West show or circuses well into her 60s, and in truth, I admire her greatly. Lulu Parr died in January of 1955. And I was 3.5 years old. Among her prized possession was a 5-barrel nickel and gold plated .45, you can see it in her hand there, Colt revolver engraved Buffalo Bill Cody to Lulu Parr, 1911. What her relationship with Cody, we can only guess. They met when he was an older gentleman. But this was typical of Cody. He gave guns to everyone he was fond of. I have a book that shows many guns and rifles he gave to people. He gave them away like jewelry. And Cody was something of a woman libus. Now we're going to skip on down because we're running out of time here. Buffalo Bill said he didn't want to die, just another old showman. And in reality, Cody was lucky. He had found himself and what he did best. But he never sought. He was always looking for something else better to get rich with. Cody must have made a number of fortunes. He was a millionaire heir a couple of times over, but he spent his money. He gave his money away to his family, to his friends, to poor investments. You needed a loan, some money, all you had to do was ask Cody. Annie Oakley said he was the easiest touch above ground. He bought a gold mine in Arizona. He put thousands into it, maybe even millions. It never paid off, and I think the guys that were running it probably took his money. He tried to find a substitute for coffee. He helped settle Cody, Wyoming. He even became an historical filmmaker. He made a movie on Wounded Knee and used the people who were a part of it. It was so violent and so truthful that people had a hard time watching it. The movie disappeared, and now there's not a copy of it to be found anywhere. He helped bring irrigation into the Bighorn Valley, but in his own lifetime, it would never pay off. So by 1913, he was broke. July 25th, 1913, to Clarence W. Rowley, attorney. This is what Cody wrote him. The old show went out of business on the 22nd. It nearly broke my heart and could have been avoided if Lily, his partner in show business, had not been like a dog in the manger. Lily would not fork over money to keep the show floating, and it was foreclosed on by the sheriffs. For there is 4 years of the management has been bad, and I am glad it's over. I am going off in the Rockies for a little mental and body relaxation. Then I'll go at it with my old-time vigor. I am not down and out by a long jump. Write me, Cody, Wyoming, yours, Colonel. By 1913, Cody was broke. He could not meet his expenses, and Buffalo Wild Bill's Wild West went into bankruptcy and was sold at auction, including his horse and saddle and bridle. A friend of his bought the horse and the saddle and bridle for him and gave it to him, and Cody sat down and wept. He was reduced to traveling with other outdoor shows. He wanted to retire and he could not, for he had no money. He had to keep working right up to the last 2 months before he died. His last performance before the public in November of 1916, and he died January 10th in 1917 at his sister's house in Denver, Colorado. He was 1 month shy of his 71st birthday. And I went to this seminar, and one of the books they read, I'm just a real quick, Stories of the Wild West and Campfire Chats by Buffalo Bill. It's a book about Buffalo Bill, Wild Bill, Kit Carson, Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett, Sam Houston, General Cook, Miles, and Custer, including also Sitting Bull, Geronimo, and many other famous frontier Indian fighters and great Indian chiefs. And the guy that presented this part of the talk feels that Cody actually wrote this. Pretty amazing. But I think, and the guy also more or less said that he probably copied it. You could do things like that back then. There was no copyright problem. You can just take stuff and copy it. So they think he probably copied other people's work. It's pretty weighty. But he did point out that in the back there is, Cody talks about his time in Europe. And we won't go into that when he was in England. It's pretty interesting. But at the end of the prefix is kind of touching, and I'm going to read this as a fond farewell, so to speak. For the small part I have taken in redeeming the West from savagery, I'm indebted to circumstances rather than to a natural inborn inclination for the strife inseparable from the life I was almost forced to choose. But especially good fortune must I make my acknowledgments, which protected me or preserved my life 100 times, when the very hand of vengeful fate appeared to lower its grasp above my head, and hope seemed a mockery that I had turned my back upon. Good fortune has also stood ever responsive to my call, since I first came before the public and to the generous American and English people, as well as to the kind fortune I have poured over a full measure of profound thanks and hearty appreciation, and shall hold them grateful in my memory as a remembrance of old friends, until the drums tap lights out as the close of the evening of my eventful life. And sincerely yours, William F. Cody, Buffalo Bill. And thank you very much. How old was Buffalo Bill when he killed Yellow Hand? I think he was in his late 20s or early 30s, somewhere around in there. He was in his 30s, 30 years old. Yes?
I remember going to all these circuses, and they had a wild little Cody, and the Indians running around. Clayville, Iowa, and so on. And that went on for years and years. I just enjoyed it.
Yeah, the whole idea. Well, he started the rodeo. He started the Indian powwow. And, he set the stage for John Wayne. And, the Indians are all dressed like Sioux Indians in every movie you see, because after he used Sioux Indians later on exclusively. Where did he go overseas? He took the entire Wild West by boat. He took horses, buffalo, Indians who were scared to cross the ocean, and a whole array of cowboys and Wild West people across the ocean to England. That was his first stop. And then he went to France, he went to Germany, he went to Spain. I was introduced with the name Cody, and what does all that mean? When I was 18, I started obsessing over him when I was 18, and I owe him a lot. He's the reason why I'm interested in history. He's the reason why I know anything about Buffalo Bill or General Custer, and he's the reason why I'm doing the history discussion group now, because he has influenced me so greatly. When I was 18, I wanted to be an actress, and that didn't really pan out for me. But his life was like, gosh, it's like he's living the life I wanted to live. He was a great horseman. He just rode beautifully, and that's what I aspire to. I'm pretty old for that. He was just an all-around really lovely person, very approachable. He loved kids. He was very generous, and I just can't say enough nice things about this lovely man. Yes.
How early did he get the name Buffalo?
Buffalo Bill, he got that name from, he was hired, after he left his wife, he was hired to hunt buffalo for the opening of the Union Pacific Railroad for the workers. And he would go out and bring the buffalo in. And there's a mythical buffalo hunt that he and another guy by the name of Comstock was supposedly had to see which one of them would get the title Buffalo Bill. And the theory is that he killed more buffalo than Comstock, so he got the title Buffalo Bill. But I think what really happened is from hunting buffalo for the railroad workers, that's how he got the name Buffalo Bill. Thank you so very much. You've been very kind.
Thank you for watching Peninsula Senior Lecture Series. I'm Betty Wheaton. See you next time.